What happens when the single most feared weapon in the Middle East, a missile designed to travel at 15 times the speed of sound, is fired toward its target, only to disappear into thin air before anyone even hears the explosion? Because that is not a hypothetical question anymore. That is the exact reality that just unfolded in the waters near the Persian Gulf, and military commanders in Tehran are still trying to figure out how their greatest strategic advantage vanished in less than a second. Before we step onto the deck of the warship that made this happen, do me one small favor: hit the subscribe button right now. This channel breaks down the real story behind global power moves, and this specific move might be the biggest shift in naval history you will see this year. For over a decade, Iran built its entire military reputation around a bold claim: they had created a hypersonic missile so fast, so unpredictable, and so advanced that no defense system on Earth could ever intercept it. They named it the Fata. It was designed to fly through the upper atmosphere, maneuver mid-flight, and strike high-value naval targets before traditional radar systems could even process the threat. It was supposed to be the ultimate checkmate against Western power. The weapon that guaranteed no foreign fleet could ever stand in the Persian Gulf without facing total destruction. Iran believed this missile gave them absolute control over the world's most dangerous maritime choke point. But threats only hold power as long as nobody tests them in the real world. This year, the United States Navy did not just test the threat. They completely flipped the chessboard. They did not launch a bigger interceptor missile. They did not scramble fighter jets. Instead, they pressed a single quiet button, powering up a weapon that travels at 186,000 miles per second. To understand why this moment sent shockwaves through global military headquarters, you have to understand why hypersonic missiles terrified military planners in the first place. For decades, traditional missile defense was based on a simple mathematical formula. Standard ballistic missiles follow a predictable curved path through the sky. They launch, fly high into space, and fall back down toward their target like a thrown baseball. Because their path is predictable, computers can calculate where they will be in 10 seconds and launch an interceptor missile to blow them up in midair. Hypersonic missiles broke that math completely. A hypersonic missile like Iran's Fatah does not fly in a simple, predictable curve. It stays low in the atmosphere, traveling faster than Mach 5, which is over 3,800 miles per hour. But speed is only half the problem. The real nightmare is maneuverability. A hypersonic weapon can zigzag, change direction, and shift altitude in fractions of a second while moving at hypervelocity. Imagine trying to hit a bullet with another bullet in total darkness, while the first bullet is constantly turning left and right. That was the challenge facing every traditional defense system. Aegis radars, Patriot batteries, and THAAD interceptors were all built around predictable physics. The hypersonic threat made them look outdated overnight. Iranian generals knew this. They repeatedly reminded the world that once a hypersonic missile is launched, reaction time drops to near zero. A ship's crew might only get a few seconds between detecting the threat and impact. For years, this created an invisible barrier of fear. The belief was that if a major war broke out, foreign aircraft carriers and destroyers would be sitting ducks in narrow waters. The entire strategy of the Iranian regime relied on this single belief: depth, speed, and chaos would always beat modern armor. Even beyond the raw speed of hypersonic weapons, there was a second, much quieter problem that was slowly draining the strength of Western naval power: the brutal economics of modern missile defense. Think about how traditional naval air defense actually works. When an adversary launches a drone or a missile toward a warship, that warship has to fire an interceptor missile to knock it out of the sky. An advanced surface-to-air missile like the Standard Missile-2 or SM-6 is an incredible piece of engineering. It has its own rocket motor, complex radar guidance, and explosive warhead, but each one costs anywhere between $2 million and $4 million. Now, consider what the warship is shooting down. In recent regional conflicts, Iranian-backed forces and coastal batteries began launching swarms of low-cost attack drones and anti-ship missiles. A basic kamikaze drone might only cost $20,000 to build out of commercial parts. A simple cruise missile might cost $50,000. Do the quick math on that exchange. A warship uses a $4 million missile to destroy a $20,000 drone. That is not just an unequal trade. It is an unsustainable mathematical trap. An adversary does not even need to land a direct hit on a warship to win the fight. All they have to do is launch dozens of cheap weapons day after day until the warship's launch magazines run completely empty. Once a destroyer runs out of million-dollar interceptor missiles, it becomes completely defenseless, no matter how advanced its combat systems are. Iran built its entire tactical doctrine around this exact flaw. They planned to overwhelm naval defenses using sheer numbers, swarming destroyers with hundreds of cheap drones while saving their hypersonic missiles for the final, decisive blow. It was a strategy built on economic exhaustion. To break an impossible mathematical trap, you cannot just build a slightly better missile. You have to change the fundamental rules of physics under which the enemy operates. And that is precisely what the United States Navy quietly did when they integrated high-energy laser systems, like Helios and tactical directed energy weapons, onto their forward-deployed destroyers in the region. When people hear the word laser, they often think of science fiction movies or theatrical special effects. But the weapon deployed aboard modern Arleigh Burke-class destroyers is cold, silent, and terrifyingly practical. Instead of launching a physical metal canister filled with rocket fuel into the sky, a directed energy system gathers electrical power directly from the ship's massive gas turbine generators. It focuses a concentrated, invisible beam of high-power photons and directs it straight toward an incoming target. Here is why that single technological leap changes everything. A hypersonic missile flies at Mach 15, which is roughly 3 miles per second. That sounds impossibly fast to a human observer, but a laser beam travels at the speed of light, 186,000 miles per second. To a laser beam, a Mach 15 hypersonic missile is not fast at all. In fact, it is practically standing completely still. There is no lead time to calculate. There is no wind adjustment required. There is no travel time for the projectile to reach its target. The moment the ship's combat system locks onto the incoming threat and fires, the energy hits the target instantly. The maneuverability that made hypersonic missiles so deadly against kinetic interceptors suddenly becomes completely useless, because no physical missile can dodge a beam of light. The game of hide-and-seek in the sky ended the moment light itself became the bullet. While the speed of light solved the physical problem of hypersonic missiles, the laser weapon solved an even bigger problem for the Navy, the mathematical trap that threatened to bankrupt their defenses. Remember the $4 million missile used to shoot down a $20,000 drone? Directed energy weapons take that equation and flip it upside down in a way that military strategists call an economic checkmate. A naval high-energy laser does not use explosive warheads, complex rocket motors, or expensive microchips that get destroyed after a single use. It runs entirely on electricity generated by the ship's internal diesel and gas turbine engines. The cost to fire a high-power laser beam continuously at an incoming threat comes down to a few gallons of marine fuel, costing roughly $1 to $10 per shot. Think about what that dramatic shift means in actual combat. An adversary like Iran can spend millions of dollars assembling a massive swarm of fast attack drones, anti-ship cruise missiles, and ballistic warheads. They launch them all at once, expecting to overwhelm the warship's finite ammunition supply. In the past, that warship had maybe 20 to 40 interceptor missiles in its vertical launch tubes. Once those were gone, the ship was forced to retreat or risk destruction. With a laser system, the ammunition supply is effectively infinite. As long as the ship's engines are running and generating electrical power, the warship can keep firing indefinitely. It can burn through 10 threats, 100 threats, or 1,000 threats in a single engagement without ever running out of magazine capacity. Iran's entire strategy of economic exhaustion evaporated overnight. The multi-million-dollar swarms designed to drain American stockpiles suddenly met a defense system that cost less than a fast food meal per trigger pull. Most people assume that when a laser hits a missile, there is a giant, theatrical fireball in the sky like in a sun. The actual physics of how a high-energy laser neutralizes a Mach 15 hypersonic weapon is far colder, quieter, and much more brutal. A hypersonic missile flying through the atmosphere is already operating at the absolute limit of materials science. Because it travels at thousands of miles per hour, extreme friction with the surrounding air creates intense kinetic heat along the missile's outer skin. The nose cone and control fins are subjected to temperatures soaring past thousands of degrees Fahrenheit. The missile's structural integrity relies on delicate heat shielding and precision-engineered aerodynamics to keep from melting itself mid-flight. Now, picture introducing a 100-kilowatt concentrated beam of coherent light directly onto that hyper-stressed outer skin. The laser does not need to blow the missile into tiny pieces. It focuses tens of thousands of watts of thermal energy onto a single, precise spot, usually the nose cone housing the guidance sensors, or the delicate hydraulic control fins. Within less than a second, the intense thermal energy burns directly through the outer thermal tiles or aluminum casing. The moment a tiny hole is burned into the missile's outer skin, extreme aerodynamic pressure takes over. Air rushing past at Mach 15 forces its way inside the structural breach, ripping the missile apart from the inside out due to raw atmospheric drag. Alternatively, the laser instantly blinds the optical and radar sensors in the guidance package. Without active sensors to adjust its trajectory, a hypersonic weapon flying at hypervelocity instantly loses control and tumbles harmlessly into the ocean, miles away from its target. Light did not just hit the missile, it made the air itself destroy the weapon. To see the real-world impact of this technological leap, you have to look directly at the map of the Strait of Hormuz. For more than 40 years, Iran used this narrow waterway as its primary geopolitical weapon. Nearly 1/5 of the entire world's oil supply passes through this single choke point every single day. Tankers from Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, the UAE, and Qatar all squeeze through the same narrow channel right off the Iranian coastline. Every time Western nations placed sanctions on Tehran, Iranian officials gave the world the exact same warning: we can close the strait. We can choke global oil supplies, spike fuel prices, and crash Western economies. End quote. For decades, that threat worked. It worked because closing the strait was seen as such a chaotic move that even the threat alone made international markets nervous. Iran treated the waterway like a loaded gun pointed directly at the global economy. When tensions escalated into open conflict, Iran tried to execute its classic strategy. They planted naval mines, launched swarms of fast attack boats, and deployed coastal missile batteries aimed at commercial traffic. Their goal was simple: force Western forces into a grinding battle of attrition inside dangerous, narrow waters. Instead, the deployment of laser-equipped Arleigh Burke destroyers completely transformed the strategic geometry of the strait. American warships did not just defend themselves, they created an invisible shield over commercial shipping corridors. Fast attack boats, surveillance drones, and coastal anti-ship missiles that used to threaten tankers were systematically neutralized before they could ever reach target range. The loaded gun Iran held against the global economy was quietly disarmed, not by firing thousands of explosive shells, but by projecting an impenetrable umbrella of light over the water. When a regime bases its entire sense of global power on a weapon that gets neutralized in real time, the public narrative becomes just as critical as the physical battle on the water. Pay close attention to how state media in Tehran responded when their unstoppable hypersonic systems began failing, because propaganda often reveals far more truth than it intends to hide. Shortly after engagements in the Gulf, Iranian state television broadcasted dramatic animated clips showing American aircraft carriers being struck by overwhelming missile waves and sinking beneath the waves. High-ranking spokespeople appeared on news broadcasts, declaring that foreign fleets were retreating and that no ship in the region was safe from their advanced strike capabilities. On the surface, this looked like standard wartime confidence. But think about who those video clips were actually produced for. Military commanders at the Pentagon do not change operational strategy because of an animated cartoon. Decision makers in Washington rely on real-time satellite imagery, infrared tracking data, and battle damage assessments, not state TV animations. Those videos were not meant for America. They were created for the domestic Iranian population, a civilian population living through skyrocketing inflation, severe power blackouts, economic isolation, and heavy military losses needs a powerful narrative to hold on to. The dramatic propaganda clips were an inward message of reassurance, designed to convince ordinary citizens that their government was still winning and still in complete control. Whenever propaganda becomes overly dramatic and disconnected from reality on the ground, it usually signals deep uncertainty behind closed doors. Threatening speeches are often what military forces rely on when the actual capability to back up those threats has been systematically worn down on the battlefield. While high-energy lasers operate visibly on the surface of the water, the true strength of modern naval defense relies on an invisible digital web operating high above and deep below the waves. A laser weapon, no matter how powerful, is only as good as the radar system that tells it exactly where to point. In the Persian Gulf, American destroyers do not fight alone as isolated ships. They are tied into a fully integrated combat network known as the Aegis Baseline System. Instead of each warship scanning its own local airspace and reacting independently, every sensor across the entire fleet shares data instantly in real time. If a satellite orbiting in space detects the thermal flash of a hypersonic missile launch deep inside Iranian territory, that tracking data is fed to every ship, aircraft, and defense system in the theater within milliseconds. Long before an incoming Mach 15 missile comes anywhere near visual range, the ship's automated combat system has already calculated its trajectory, prioritized the threat, and queued up the directed energy laser to lock onto the exact coordinates the moment it clears the horizon. Beneath the surface, silent American attack submarines patrol completely undetected. Equipped with advanced sonar arrays and electronic warfare packages, these submarines track coastal missile batteries and fast attack boat movements without ever surfacing. They feed targeting data into the shared fleet web without ever revealing their exact positions. Iran's military planners thought they were launching missiles against individual warships. In reality, they were trying to attack a single, massive, hyper-connected organism that sees everything simultaneously across air, land, sea, and space. Against an integrated sensor network moving at light speed, traditional swarm tactics designed for an older era simply fall apart. When a military regime loses its single most trusted weapon, it does not simply surrender and walk away. Instead, it enters a deeply dangerous phase where strategic desperation can easily trigger unpredictable escalations. Right now, leadership in Tehran is sitting in front of 3 remaining options, and every single one of them carries extreme risk for the entire region. The first option is to launch massive, uncoordinated swarm attacks using every remaining drone, speedboat, and short-range ballistic missile they have left in storage. The goal would be to physically overwhelm the fleet through sheer density, hoping that if they launch 500 weapons at once, a few might slip past the laser umbrella. But as naval laser systems scale up in power and numbers, trying to saturate an infinite magazine of light becomes a losing strategy that rapidly consumes remaining inventory. The second option is regional proxy escalation. With direct naval options neutralized, Iran can instruct aligned militias across Iraq, Syria, and Yemen to step up attacks on foreign bases, commercial shipping lanes, and energy pipelines. This keeps pressure on Western allies without directly engaging American naval destroyers in open water. The third and most dangerous option is striking energy infrastructure belonging to neighboring Gulf states. Officials in Tehran have publicly warned that if their ports are blockaded or their weapons rendered useless, neighboring oil facilities in Saudi Arabia, the UAE, or Qatar could become targets. This is the central paradox of modern warfare. When high-tech defense systems neutralize an enemy's primary deterrence, they force that enemy into a corner. And a regime fighting for its financial and political survival inside a corner is far more likely to make a sudden, explosive miscalculation that turns a localized naval standoff into a full-scale regional war. What we are witnessing in the Persian Gulf right now is not just another isolated skirmish between rival nations. It is a fundamental historical pivot in how modern naval warfare is fought, financed, and won. For over 40 years, the Iranian regime built its entire sense of regional power around control of a single narrow waterway. They spent billions of dollars developing fast attack boats, laying naval minefields, and building an arsenal of hypersonic missiles designed to make the Strait of Hormuz an impenetrable fortress. They treated that waterway as an unshakable leverage point, a gun pointed directly at the global economy that would always force the world to hesitate, compromise, and back down. Today, that math has been permanently rewritten. The hypersonic missile, the very weapon Iran built to guarantee its regional dominance, did not bring Western power to its knees. Instead, it forced the development and operational deployment of a defense technology so fast, so precise, and so cheap that it effectively neutralized the threat of missile swarms forever. The gun Iran held against the global economy is still sitting on the coast, but the leverage behind it has fundamentally changed hands. The strait remains open to global shipping, international tankers continue to pass through, and the very nation that spent generations positioning itself as the ultimate gatekeeper finds its strategic leverage melting away at the speed of light. Wars are rarely won through loud firepower alone. They are won by whoever controls the strategic resources and technological high ground that the other side simply cannot survive without. If this video helped you actually understand the real strategy behind the headlines, do not forget to hit like and subscribe right now. Share this with someone who wants the full picture, and leave a comment below telling me what surprised you most about this shift.